Venerable members of the Sangha, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to be able to stand here, myself a native of New York City, in order to speak to the UN at the United Nations on this august occasion of Waisakha, commemorating the birth, enlightenment, and passing away of Lord Buddha. In a work in Pali called the Sutta Nipata, the Buddha is extolled with the expression Mula Dasavi, which means one who sees the root. What is a root? The root is a fundamental cause, the basis for the fruits that grow out of the roots. The human aspiration is to be free from suffering and to find happiness, to be free from bondage and to find true freedom and purity of the mind, to be free from darkness and to find the light of wisdom. As the seer of the root, the Buddha has seen the fundamental underlying causes that lead to suffering and to happiness, to bondage and to liberation. And the fundamental cause that the Buddha has seen is the mind itself. Whether there is suffering or happiness, freedom or bondage, depends upon the direction of the mind, the way we develop and cultivate our minds. But the Buddha has seen even more deeply into those factors of the mind that are responsible both for bondage and liberation, for suffering and for happiness. He saw in the mind what are called the three unwholesome roots, the three destructive roots, which he called greed, hatred, and delusion, or craving, anger, and ignorance. In the Buddha's teaching, the emphasis is on personal liberation from the roots, the unwholesome roots of greed, hatred, and delusion. But the Buddha's teaching has a surprisingly clear relevance to the crises that face the world today, our contemporary world. For if we closely examine all the problems that face the global community, we can see that they stem from the same unwholesome roots that are responsible for individual, personal suffering. We see, for example, greed manifested in the division of the world's population into a very small, powerful, extremely wealthy elite, which has taken possession of the overwhelming amount of wealth in the world, while the great majority of the world's population are living at the edge of survival. A world where perhaps 99% of the world's wealth belongs to, spread out over 50%, where 50% of the world's wealth is possessed by 99% of the world's population, and 1% controls the other 50% of the world's wealth. We see greed also in the continued exploitation of our natural resources in order to generate energy, particularly the pursuit of new sources of fossil fuels, which are contributing to global warming and to climate change. And despite all the warnings from our scientists from our best policy analysts, the powerful fossil fuel corporations continue to seek more wealth, even putting the world's population, human civilization, in grave danger. We see hatred expressed in the powerful arms industries, which manufacture weapons of destruction, whether mass destruction or limited destruction. And we see hatred in continuing conflicts based on different ethnicities, different religious beliefs, different racial affiliations. We see delusion and ignorance in the denial of truth, again coming back to the climate crisis, in the repeated refusal to recognize that climate change is driven by human activity and that the consequences of continued carbon emissions will be very dangerous for the future of humanity. So the Buddha's analysis of the three unwholesome roots are applicable not only to the individual quest for enlightenment and liberation, but also for establishing a world which is free from the destructive impacts of greed, hatred, and delusion. As a seer of the root, the Buddha also saw into the beautiful or wholesome capacities of the human mind. And he saw the underlying roots of those beautiful capacities in the three wholesome roots of non-greed or generosity, non-hatred or loving kindness, and non-delusion or wisdom. So in the spirit of generosity, what we have to do as for those who are responsible for global policy is to create a global policy of generosity, whereby those in possessions of wealth, the wealthy nations, effectively assist the poorer countries to eliminate poverty, hunger, malnutrition, the oppression of women, and provide human rights, protect the human rights of everybody, so that all people will be able to enjoy sufficient food, clean water, clean air, and a sustainable environment. In pursuing the route of non-hatred, we have to develop a mind of kindness and respect towards people all over the world, overcoming antagonisms based on difference of religion, race, ethnicity, and instead respect the humanity of every living being and understand that every human being is entitled to live a life of dignity and meaning. In cultivating the wholesome root of wisdom, we have to understand the principle of cause and effect and see how our personal conduct, as well as our national and international policies, have global ramifications that extend all over the world, which is woven together into an inseparable, interconnected totality. And we must also be aware of the long-term consequences of our present decisions and policies, seeing that actions that we take now in 2017 will have consequences over the next decade, the decade after that, 50 years, 100 years, and even longer in the future. This is wisdom, understanding the truth, and acting on the basis of truth. So we can see that even though the Buddha taught 2,600 years ago, his teachings are so relevant to us in this present time as we struggle to create a world in which all people can live together peacefully in a sustainable environment, in societies which look after the needs of everyone, including the least and most and poorest amongst us. Thank you for your attention, and may all the blessings of Waisakha be with you. Okay, Amberworth. Okay, thank you.
You can hold
Yeah, I could.